Hi everyone, I'm Lou Underwood, Assistant Director for Alumni Relations at Krannert School. I'm joined today by Byron Young. Byron is the Manager for City Territory Analytics at Nike. Welcome back to campus, Byron.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be back and happy to talk to the students and love to talk to you.
What brought you to Purdue in the first place as a student?
Definitely, so a couple things. I think number one, my older brother actually went to Purdue and my younger brother graduated from Krannert last year, so we're Purdue family. But honestly, the reputation. So I knew Purdue was a strong school for business, but also a strong school for a general degree. Ton of reputation, ton of ability within the state of Indiana. I wanted to stay in state, and so this to me felt like home when I visited campus.
Well, you wanted to stay in state, but after graduation you went to work for Target.
I did that.
And then now you're at Nike, so how did all that transpire?
Definitely. So right after school, I had internships at Target and I got a full-time offer to come back to work at Target headquarters. I worked as a business analyst. Really got to get a strong retail knowledge base. And so really understanding core retail from a online and from an in-store perspective. And so developed a ton of skills within that space. Ended up moving to New York City. I worked for Twitter and I did a lot of social insights and information and really understanding what consumers are saying. And then that led me to getting back into retail for a company called Mad Engine, where I managed wholesale planning. And then going to Nike, Nike's a huge wholesale supplier, so we sell to a ton of retailers such as Foot Locker and Dick's Sporting Goods. And so kind of my experience as being a core retail background, understanding who the consumer is, which is what Nike's core is, and then ultimately my experience in wholesale led me to Nike, and so I've been there ever since.
City Territory Analytics Manager, what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Definitely, that's a really good question. So what I would say is I boil it down to really two things. So my first piece is to really look at marketplace information. So that's point of sale, sales data, so your sales at the register. That's to look at consumer data, so who the consumers are, where do they live, who are they, how much money do they make, what do they look like, what type of information about them. Marketplace data, right? So is this city growing? Is this particular trade zone, do they have a lot of construction? Are they growing, and is the population expected to move there? And then taking that information and marrying it with Nike's sales financial plan. So Nike, we want to grow by X% by year 2023, right? And so how do we actually get there is the marrying of those two. And so for me, I'm over the Central Territory, and the key cities are Chicago, Dallas, and Houston. And so we really want to grow within our territory, but specifically in those cities. And so I take that information, combine it together, and bring a simplified story to our senior leadership. So our GM of the territory and our senior sales director, those two are making a lot of the decisions as to where we're going to invest a new store. And so my information is giving them, this is where we should build it, or this is a product that we need to add to this particular trade zone, or this is particular area in our territory is underpenetrated. How do we get more Nike product there? And so that's essentially what my role is, marrying those two together and giving those recommendations.
You're using analytics on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely.
How did what you learned at Purdue help you to be able to do that?
Yeah, helped me tremendously. So I studied business management, but I also had a concentration in marketing and entrepreneurship certificate in innovation. What those two things really did were to help me to think traditionally, but then also think very differently. And so I think when you start to look at analytics, you're really a storyteller. So you're building a story. What is the information saying? What is the data saying? And I would say my education at Purdue really helped me to really say, hey, this is what traditional business would say it's saying. But this program really says, this is how you can think about it differently. And then I think too, at Purdue, I had a core foundation in a lot of different areas, from supply chain to accounting to finance. And so I knew how my decisions were actually going to impact the rest of the business functions. And so Purdue did an awesome job preparing me for that role.
So using those analytics every day.
Yeah.
Technology, what role does technology play in your life there at Nike?
It's huge. Technology, I think, is really shaping the way we're actually making those decisions. And so, one, that's where our consumers are. The consumers are on their phones more times than we can ever imagine. Nike's actually rolled out a sneakers app, which is where people can actually purchase shoes specifically from an app on their phone. And so, for me, myself, part of my role is really also looking at that information, looking at that data, and from the tech side to really understand how do we actually make decisions. I'll give you a quick example. So a particular area code in Chicago, what we found was there was a particular product of running shoes that was always over-indexing within that specific area. And it turns out that there had been a retailer that was there before that had closed. And so the consumers were still there, but they didn't have any distribution. So they were going into the tech to actually make those purchases. And so, as we're going through it now, what we're just trying to determine is, do we need to bring another partner into that area? And so those are some of the decisions that we're really leveraging the technology that we're seeing to actually help us inform the decisions that we're making.
How do you stay current on those new technology trends and products?
I definitely listen to a lot of podcasts. And then I think two, really talking with consumers. I think the voice of the consumer is ultimately the driver of marketing and sales, right? You are translating what the voice of the consumer is saying. And so we routinely get out into the market. We'll go every other week, visit stores, talk to people shopping there. What are you looking for? What technology is influencing your decisions? And I think that insight and that information is really what is really driving those learnings.
So a lot of data. There's a lot of talk about big data nowadays. What's the biggest mistake that an analyst can make with big data?
The biggest mistake is to forget the consumer. I think a lot of times within big data, we want that to make the decision for us. So, for example, data may tell us that this particular area of the country or this trade zone, sales are dropping, there's no consumers are there, but we don't actually know what has actually happened within that information. So I think you have a tendency to make decisions based on what you've seen on paper. Oh, well, we don't need to have any of those stores open there. But then you actually go visit the community, and maybe the sports program lost funding within that area. And so us as Nike, how do we actually say, oh, maybe that's why their consumers are consuming less products in this area, because there's no longer a big sports team, a big soccer team that was there. Well, can we influence that and bring sport back to their lives? And can we make sure that becomes, because it's not that the consumer doesn't want to be there, but the data will show us something different. So I think there's a good piece about big data, always looking at it, what it's saying, looking at the predictability of it, but then you have to get into those particular areas and you have to really dive in and uncover what really the consumer is and what they're saying there. So I think that the challenge is just making sure you don't forget the consumer when you're looking in the big data.
That's good. So today, we're not going to forget our students, because you're speaking in the Krannert Forum today.
Right.
So what's your message for students?
My message for students today is really around this concept of putting your values before your reputation. So I think John Wooden was one of my favorite figures. He's a Purdue alum and great coach. And he has this quote, and he says, your character is more important than your reputation, because your character is who you are, and your reputation is merely what others think you are. And I think my message to the students today is really to focus on developing who they are, developing their character, what's important to them, their values, and let those guide the decisions that they make in their career. And I think if they do that, they'll be successful.
Well, we want to thank you today, Byron, for being here, and we're glad to have you back on campus.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here to speak to the students.
For Byron Young, I'm Lou Underwood.